For example, if we take and compare the information model, teaching with its central focus amounts to a set of functions. Popular one, the set is orienting, motivating, presenting, clarifying, elaborating, consolidating, and confirming. Things that I think that I do all the time. John, I don't want to be shut out of any one of those kinds of things. To say that I have to do something different might force me to think a little differently about my job. We'll just for a moment consider a software learning environment. We've seen many. And it relates to an asynchronous program form of teaching. The tendency, however, is to separate the information part of the process from the more interactive and supportive elements when we're thinking through this theory that we're going to use. When in reality, the X functions of teaching can be replaced by a set of two, informing and supporting. Supporting incorporates the variety of the others that we just talked about. What we're doing right now in the true constructionist form, following constructivism, is we're going to change the terminology without changing the process. But teaching is going to be defined to the delivery of information and support. So no longer are we focusing in on the teaching aspect, but more on the delivery and more on the learner and what we're going to do to support that learning. In constructivism, or IBL, internet-based learning, is another term that you see, and you have to read the literature carefully to know that they're talking about one and the same. The traditional syllabus is replaced with a study map having navigable interfaces and that preserve context and facilitates reflective learning. We're all familiar with the object-oriented hierarchy. Books have that. You got your chapters, paragraphs, the user interfaces, the contents page, you have syllabi, and those kinds of things. This scheme is widely used, and there's nothing wrong with it. But it fosters the view that personal knowledge is either object-oriented or related to information having such a structure. In IBL, it's more appropriate design instruction that uses a model without any directional bias that's inherent, as we saw in the object-oriented hierarchy. This is just sort of a little graph, and as a two-dimensional graph, if we could do it 3D and get the sideways views, we'd see more of those interconnected links. But this does have directional bias to it, and that's one thing that constructivism tells us as a theory in appropriate circumstances should not be used. So we begin to see this study map as the same kind of that we would in a book. So that all the objects correspond to units and links and describe the relationship between them. That's an important part to recognize, and we can add other units as we go along. IBL does not require a hierarchy. Oh my gosh! Anarchy! Informational anarchy. They marched yesterday, taking back the streets. Here we go, we're taking back the streets of our minds. How can this be? Now, if faculty members stayed with me to this point, this is where they hit the off button. How can it not require a hierarchy? Where do I go with this stuff? You've got to give me some kind of map. Well, I think of the map in Hunting the Snark, and I don't have time to go there. But this particular map that we just describes a study program that starts at any object and proceeds through any connected objects. There's no assumed learning sequence. Each one is separate and may be a complete course in and of itself. Here is the important point. The learner chooses the sequence. The learner chooses the sequence. It's exploratory learning that is the essential activity in constructivist learning theory. Remember when the early principles, they have their own personal knowledge database that they construct and then use to solve the problem I give them. Whereas behavioral design of instruction, which is most typical, I give them the knowledge base they are to use, they are to work within the confines of that. And the only exploratory learning might be, oh, here's some supplemental reading, please read it at your convenience. Again, constructivist learning principle. Learner is active in knowledge construction. They can access databases. They can get it from anywhere. They're not limited. they gain ownership of the process used to develop knowledge or identify a solution. A big point of TQM, Kaizen, all the rest of them, of 10 years of applying this to higher education tells us that you've got to own the process so that you can have significant results come out of it. And constructivism, as a learning theory that I can use, emphasizes that. It anchors tasks to reality. And another important thing is that it tests against alternate views in context. And I'll show you that very quickly in the site in a moment. It also anchors to real-life situations. Real-life situations for law students generally focus not on personal learning goals. This all sounds great, but it focuses on assessment. This is constructobabble that means nothing more than grades. So that students really want to know, how much of this stuff do I have to read to answer the question to get the grade? You can have all of these supplementary links that you want to. For some interesting thing, click here, read this, read that. They're not going to do it. Time is a precious commodity for them. And they want to know how it is I can get the job done, get my grade. Well, if we're talking about grades in constructivism, we're talking about assessment. Constructobabble also links grades to what is called authentic activity. Now, when you begin to unravel this constructobabble, it tends to make sense. Internet-based learning is suppressed by a detailed syllabus, yet it can be used effectively for what they're calling authentic assessment. But that authentic assessment comes connected to the exploratory learning. Students have to decide how far to take their learning on the basis of how their work will be assessed, which means I have to decide how their work is going to be assessed. That's why we reported that many learners study strategically with grades in mind. Oh, really? It took that kind of a study to figure that one out? I don't think so. That it did. And that is a concluding statement. So if they're going to study strategically with that in mind, I have got to give them a certain freedom in order to proceed with their work. In an IBL type of course, the assignments are adaptable to this kind of authentic assignment since they're going to decide where they're going to go with it. Written exams are not as useful when you design a course this way. Written exams have to be closely related to the required knowledge base. And if I'm letting them build their own knowledge base, how do I know what that is? I won't know until I get something back from them. Educationalists have told us what you really do when you design a course is you get your course objectives. And then you teach to those objectives, then you assess against those objectives. Constructivist theory sort of throws a chill onto that whole idea. And when we see it in its alter ego, it's really an extension of computer-based learning, where the learner can go globally rather than locally, and the learner can identify those types of things on whether it be the internet or whatever source he or she chooses to go to, based upon the direction they're given. Who gives them that direction? What's the difference between a teaching prof and an instructional designer? I don't have anything pithy to say. All professors have the role of instructional designer. It reminds me that I'm still in charge. I'm responsible. It is not learning by serendipity, that I still have to have a plan and do something with these students. And who else should be responsible for course content and delivery but me when I am doing this to the students to begin with? A slight comparison between the two. You can run down and see the difference between behavioralism and constructivism. Once again, the focus on behavior is for someone to set up a design course to achieve a knowledge base and assess it, and the student is to master that. Constructivism sets up a real-life setting and tells the student, go build your knowledge database and come back and answer the problems that life is going to give you. There are many excellent websites to give you background and orientation to deconstruct the constructobabble on design and the like, and I could have given you dozens of them, but you can find them for yourself. So what I'm doing to you is doing a little bit of constructivism with you. You want to build a knowledge base? One way to do it, I like Copernic 99. You can download it free. It's a meta search engine. You download Copernic, you type in constructivist learning, and you'll have more information than you know possibly what to do with. few design principles before I show you one example on the web and then turn this over to my colleagues. If you've not done so, read online Art and the Zen of Web Design. Do a search and find that. It's a wonderful article. I thought I had doggone it, the coolest opening screen. Our computer services librarian, Diane, helped me do it. I said, here's what I want. I saw some cool websites. They were black pages. And ooh, eerie things happened on these black pages when you went to them. I want one of those. I want to do mouse overs and all these kinds of things. I went to the Art and Zen of Web Design and said, don't use black pages. The reason you don't want to use black pages, do you like driving at night? No, why not? It's dark, you can't see. And so I thought, let me dwell on that a little more. I got rid of the black page. Okay. Lesson information anxiety. Oh, I'm a bad one for this because I had to buy a book that says Organization for Right-Brain Dominant People. I needed a book to help me organize because I spell file, P-I-L-E. And I got lots of them around. And it causes a lot of information anxiety. Oh, there's so much out there. One thing I have to do when I design this course is teach my students about information anxiety. There's so much out there, how you put limits on it, how you control it. And we've heard other similar sessions about that today. To get a handle of all that really is out there. One thing to do is to create lessons and problems and exercises that allow the learner to construct a personal knowledge base before answering your question. So that there's not a predefined database out there that you're actually looking for, but rather there is knowledge out there, and let the student who knows how best they learn go and find it. Design active classroom module. So I'm not advocating a total online, you can't talk to me, you can't socialize, you can't do anything with me. Now if I adopt that two-element set of teaching, support and motivation, I do things in this 1-hour class. Now we don't go in, we don't talk about some of the issues in the law that are developing in security, email privacy, and those kinds of things. Rather, I go in and say, here's an exercise for today. I want you to go find the weather report for Mankato, Minnesota, and here's the site that I want you to. And I direct them to that site, and the next day we'll come together again, and what's the weather report? But I had them also compare CNN, weather.com, and the like, and wait a minute, they're finding out some diverse weather patterns for Mankato, Minnesota. How can this be? Well, one site that I direction them to is a false site. It doesn't exist anywhere except in someone's mind who put it on the web. And the one thing I had to point out to the students is that, wait a minute, CNN is out there saying the weather from Mankato is this, and here's these people saying it's that. Didn't you challenge this as to who's right, who's wrong? And it takes us to a discussion about the verifiability of information on the web. Remember, the web is nothing more than vanity publishing writ large. Anybody can put anything out there. So we need a mechanism. I need to teach my students how to search information, verify it, and do those kinds of things. So I encourage them with several discrete different kinds of classroom activities like that. Another one is that I showed them the cuckoo's egg, Cliff Stoll, the astronomer who tracked down the spy ring in the early 90s. And they like that kind of stuff, but it sparks their imagination. It helps them think about, I want to go find out more about this. So the supporting and the motivation are really kinds of things that I now have to design as a part of the active classroom. The focus on the assessment, however, comes in this. It's still a 1-hour class. They still got to get a grade for it. They'd all love A's. I'd love to give them all A's. It would sort of remove, hopefully, that stigma there that, I've got to work hard just to get this A instead of focusing in on the knowledge that they're getting, the fun of learning, the thrill of success, all those kinds of wonderful things. And so what I have done is I have set this up so that they go to these discrete lessons. They have to write a research paper based on their knowledge base that they have come up with, and I will assess them on that. I will assess them on the reflected actions that I see. Now, a large part, the course, by the way, happens to be captioned Internet Law 1, and there's also an Internet Law 2. So most of the information in this area is not in book print yet. It's on the web, and it's forcing the students to think about these things from an existing knowledge base. They know torts, they know criminal law, they know contracts, they know all these other kinds of things. They're now out there searching and looking and building a knowledge base for themselves. And so when I assess them, I'm assessing on the reflective work, not on the amount of knowledge that they have accumulated along the way. Back here. Okay. And I'll take you now briefly to show you this link hot thing. Okay. So I get my glasses on. Okay. One more. Come on up here, Diane. Okay, that's an opening page for the law school dean's message. But Diane and Ed Martin principally have constructed this as a gateway page for the faculty, for anybody who wants to put a course up there. And over here we have our cool pop-ups that tell us what the course is if you're looking for it and the like. We have certain links. There we go. I'll take you there. All right, this was designed over a year ago, a little cartoonish, but it's the first thing I could come up with, and this was Internet Law, and here is one of the things that I subtly put in there. The wavy X is the flag of Alabama, which is where we are from. And so I put here, you are at the X. All around you is cyberspace. Where do you want to go? Ooh, a little paraphrase of Microsoft, but hey, I'm sorry, Bill. That idea is, hey, you are going to do the decisions about where you're going to go in these course materials. I'm going to provide you some of the traditional kinds of things about a syllabus, and in the syllabus you get all the typical information, and then you get the exercises. Now this I have to do a little work on, because notice I am not a converted constructivist yet, because exercise 1, 2, 3, it sort of looks linear. Like you got to start with exercise 1. And I guess what I'm going to have to do now when I go back is get some type of graphic, like a wheel, and let them click anywhere they want to go instead of this linear kind of thing. And then they can click on these exercises, they can learn about these things, and they do it at their own pace. There is an outside deadline, August 9th. All exercises must be done, form mailed back to me. The research paper has to be done in my hands by August 9th. So they have an outside limit. Each of these exercises has a series of links. Hey, go here, go there, go anywhere you want to go, and then answer this question. And so each one then has a question that they're going to respond and answer back to me. And so I keep these then in sort of their own little online file. And the true assessment, even though I tell them they're going to be graded on these kinds of things, that's more the carrot and the stick right now, because still it's brand new to me and I haven't quite seen how it's really going to work. So most of the assessment is on the research paper. They have the typical kinds of things. They have the bulletin boards, the discussion groups. They have a classmate file where they can contact one another. We have all the website tools for them to go to down here. And so it's pretty much looks like any other kind of IBL web-based kind of course, except that I'm letting them go serendipitously where they want to go. Now, another control factor is halfway through the semester they have to consult with me about their topic, basically because my function there is to help them narrow it. You know and I know that there's so much out there that for a 1-hour class, the topic has to be really narrowed, and they need to be careful about their time as well. I have have another course that I just designed this year using the same kind of thing as a follow-up. Again, it's a 1-hour class. Has a somewhat of a different design. It happens to be the Statue of Justice outside our law school with the Angel of Mercy hovering about her. And I thought, well, let's get away from the cartoon. Let's have a little more cachet, since it represents my growth as an instructional designer. But basically, what we see up here is these little pop-down kind of things. It has essentially the same kinds of things. You know, the course exercises, the syllabus, and something about me. But as you go into those exercises, it still allows them to explore, and it still